in the adventure that we call life, there's certain days, certain moments, certain events that, well, are just burned into your memory that you never forget. And most of the time, these memories tend to be very good. Like, oh, I don't know, say the time that you got married to a supervillain and decided to pledge your life towards ridding the world of Spider-Man. Or for those of you who maybe have children, you remember the day they were born or the day they joined your military outfit in order to combat the forces of evil. But for a lot of us, some of our most joyful memories as a child before we became an adult and got married and had kids, well, unless you got married and had kids as a kid, but that would kind of be weird and maybe physically impossible. Anyway, the point is, toys are a huge generator of memories. I mean, try it right now. Close your eyes and try to picture the birthday parties, the holidays, the Arbor days, the get a good grade at school moments. I mean, I definitely remember back when I was a little girl and I got my first Malibu Barbie. This was a huge moment. I mean, it was, finally having a character that I could see as myself and take on adventures. What's called open-ended play. Or, as a specific example on a birthday, I remember for my 7th birthday getting a Y-Wing fighter. And my parents actually wrapped it and had it sitting on the foot of my bed. So that when I opened my eyes on my birthday morning, I saw, here it was. It was a beautiful gift with a bow on it and everything that was, free for me to unwrap. And I just remember the joy of seeing that first thing in the morning. Now, as we grew up and became adult toy collectors, we have an advantage over almost any other hobby out there. And that is, well, we can mark time based on our hobby. And it's a very unique thing that not every hobby is able to incorporate. And a lot of that comes from the very nature of toy collecting and specifically action figures. I mean, there's obviously a lot of hobbies and interests out there, and for the most part, hobbies tend to be experience-based. But for those of us who collect action figures, we know the first rule is acquiring as much as we possibly can, and, ye who dies with the most toys wins, right? The very nature of action figures specifically, and there's a lot of people that collect different toys, dolls, cars, Pez dispensers, we'll get into that in a moment, but there's something very unique about action figures. And there's something that is, well, more memorable. And it's actually because of the way that the human mind works and creates memories, and the fact that touch, tactile feeling, is so important here. So let me give you an example. When I went away to college, it was right at the time when Episode 1, Phantom Menace, was coming out. Well, it was actually slightly before that. But I remember my times at UC Santa Barbara where we played How Many People Can We Get on the Balcony Before It Collapses into the Sea game. That was a fun game. Oh man, the number of friends that fell into the sea. But while that was a lot of fun, toy collecting was not, at least there at college, because, well, there was no Targets, there was no Toys R Us, very little availability. And because Episode 1 was, all that at the time, for someone like me who was a fan of the original Star Wars trilogy, what would be called the classic trilogy, if you will, the one with R2 and C3PO in it. Oh, wait, no, they're in all of them. Okay, bad example, but you know the ones I'm talking about, right? Anyway, there were very few toys that were coming out at that time. The focus was on Episode 1. So in something like Jabba's Skiff Guards, which was right there, hardcore classic trilogy, and I wanted to acquire this at college, it was tough. I actually had to wind up getting it off eBay, but I remember exactly where I was. This was the Student Center at UC Santa Barbara, and I was right here on this balcony. I got the package from the Student Center mailroom, ran up to this balcony to unwrap it. I knew what it was, and I remember getting these toys almost like it was yesterday. I remember that exact moment. And part of that was because previously there had been such a drought. I'd basically gone so long without getting a new Star Wars action figure that this moment of finally getting a new figure while I was in college, since I wasn't able to toy shop the way I was in high school or post-college. And I was really excited. And the feeling of, pulling apart the packaging and taking the figures out, touching them, posing them, having that tactile feel creates those memories. Another example from my personal toy hunting was when I acquired Hawkgirl from the Justice League and eventually Justice League Unlimited line. Now, of course, toys are not without their sense of irony, and it's not just a Alanis Morissette song, but I eventually went on to become the brand manager for the Justice League line, the very line that I was collecting, and to say that was surreal is, well, surreal. that I was making a Hawkgirl action figure when I'd started by trying to collect a Hawkgirl action figure. The reason being is the first wave of Justice League figures, before they got the Unlimited to them, all came with bases that had their names spelled out, or well, not their names, but it spelled out the word Justice League. And you had to get all of the original members of the team. Well, obviously, this was part of the incentive for acquiring every character so that you could display them this way. But not all the members were available. You'll notice that one character, Hawkgirl, was not out and did not come with a base that included part of the Justice League name. She didn't ship until way later. Well, it's a long story, and I'll get into that with the whole origins of the line and how DC Direct actually started it before passing it on to Mattel. But again, that's a YouTube video for another time. The point is, I was looking and hunting and searching so hard for Hawkgirl because, well, she was really hard to find and you needed her to complete the team, even though her base was blank and didn't actually have the word Justice League. It just shows you how it really wasn't planned out. The point being is, though, I remember exactly where I was when I got this figure. It was the Target on Bristol in Santa Ana because I had just moved back to Orange County and I got a job right across from South Coast Plaza, the giant mall, in this big office building here. It was my first job at a marketing agency. I promoted glaucoma products. It's a long story. I was in pharmaceutical advertising. But if you've ever driven past South Coast Plaza, you know that building. And that's why I remember this, because it's tied to an exact moment, but more importantly, because I was able to actually touch and interact with this toy. As I was noting earlier, unlike other senses, and I mean there are senses that are linked to memory, olfactory is one of the biggest ones. That's the sense of smell, for those of you who haven't seen Jurassic Park Lost World. Anyway, the neurons in the brain that connect when we remember something are tied into our tactile feeling. Basically, when you touch something, it instantly reminds you of the last time that you touched something like this. It's just part of how memories work. I mean, there's whole YouTube videos that go into the science of exactly how the neurons fire and how the connections are made and why touch, smell, and taste are tied so much into memory, more so even than sight, since, we tend to, well, we're looking all the time. It never really turns off. But feeling, touching, and smelling is usually dependent on coming across a secondary or third, tertiary object. So, like I said, I'm not going to get into the whole science of this, but, you can look it up. There's plenty of YouTube videos and lots of term papers that go into this. Essentially, just know that the takeaway is that touch creates memory. And of all the hobbies out there, and of course there's a lot of them, and we know from this example of clip art that only white boys can have hobbies, right? Only Caucasian boys, that's why is that? Why is all clip art always like, Caucasian boys? It's like you can't, we're all into like multi-racial and, everybody being represented, but you can only find clip art of Caucasian males. Anyway, the point is anyone can have a hobby. Don't believe the clip art. And while there are hobbies that are more tactile based, such as building something, obviously, but when you do that, it's usually building something that you're then passing on. There are people who obviously keep everything they build, but it's not always permanent. And other hobbies that involve touching things like sports, where you have a ball, or music, where you have an instrument, you're playing and you're using the same object over and over again. With action figure collecting, you're constantly getting new objects and new physical objects. It's one of the only hobbies that is all about acquiring more and more and more and more. I mean, yes, you could look at stamp collecting or coin collecting the same way, but coin collecting and those kind of things tend to be done, well, there's less display space, put it that way. With action figures, they're right there, because if you're not displaying them, what's the point of collecting them, right? So you want to not only be able to display them, but here's what makes action figures different. The happiness comes from articulation. So unlike anything else that you're acquiring, collecting, and again, going back to stamp collecting or coins, baseball cards, well, most things don't move. I mean, sure, you could take a Pez dispenser and, tip the head back, but for the most part, it just sits on your shelf. With an action figure, it's very, very different. While you have the ability to organize yourself and put things next to each other, create what are called adjacencies, when you collect something physical, well, like, Tom Hanks collecting typewriters, they sit there. With an action figure, the articulation, the very nature of the build and the construction of the object, well, it incorporates and encourages you to customize how the figure is going to be put on your shelf. Are they going to be in a battle pose, or waiting for the bus pose? Are they going to be fighting someone else, holding their signature weapon? It's all about individual choice, and the articulation and touching and moving the figure to get it into exactly the position you want it to is a big, big part of the hobby. And because of this, action figure collecting, compared to other hobbies, has more tactile interaction, more hands touching. And when your hands touch something, it creates deeper memories. And because other hobbies don't require the constant reposing, well, you're not going to handle those objects as much. I mean, with, coin collecting, you may just put it into a binder and, only pull it out every once in a while. So the ability to remember something and to be able to recall it is all tied into the amount of time you spend interacting with it. And that's why toy collectors are so cool, because we have this. We have something that almost no other hobby does, and it's all based on exactly what an action figure is, an articulated representative of a character. And the ability to pose that character, and whether it's behind glass or you're pulling it out to repose it, play with it, interact with it, the very nature of a figure and the fact that it's articulated creates the need to do this more and more, and therefore more happy memories. It's just another one of those cool things that makes action figure collecting unique and action figure collectors special. It's one of the cool parts about the hobby, and I hope you enjoy it as well. Let me know your thoughts. Do you have any specific memories tied to buying different figures in your collection? Let me know below in the comments. I'd love to hear the stories. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.